Have you ever walked through a city and just wondered why things are the way they are? You see a huge skyscraper right next to a tiny little shop, or a house that's set way, way back from the street. It can all feel a bit chaotic, almost random. But what if I told you that it's not random at all? That behind every single building, there's a story of invisible forces, of battles and compromises.
Right. So, let's get down to it. Why is a building placed exactly where it is? It seems like such a simple question, but the answer is anything but. That location isn't just a decision. It's more like a conclusion, the result of an intense, invisible tug of war between all these powerful, competing forces. So, the best way to think about it is this. An architect is kind of like a detective, and their job is to solve this massive, complex puzzle. The clues aren't fingerprints or anything like that. They're things like soil samples, old legal codes, even the path of the sun. The whole goal is to piece it all together to find the one single defensible spot for a new building. So let's start digging into what those forces actually are. Okay, so the very first set of clues in our puzzle comes from the most fundamental source there is, the land itself. Before an architect can even dream of drawing a single line, they have to learn to listen, to really hear what the natural world is telling them.
It all starts with the big picture, right? The macroclimate. We're talking regional sun paths, prevailing winds, that kind of stuff. This gives you your basic game plan. But then, and this is key, you have to zoom all the way in to the microclimate of the site itself. And that's where things get really interesting. A single big tree could cast a shadow that completely messes up your solar energy plan. A couple of tall buildings next door might create a wind tunnel right where you wanted a peaceful patio. The truth is, the specific site, it almost always gets the final say.
Next up, you've got the topography, the actual shape of the land. Smart architects learn pretty quickly that you don't fight a slope, you work with it. And one of the most elegant ways to do that is a strategy called cut and fill. It's actually brilliantly simple. You just cut soil from the high side of the property and use it to fill in the low side. The ultimate goal? To get a perfect balance so you don't have to spend a fortune hauling dirt off-site or bringing new dirt in. It's this beautiful dance between costs and efficiency.
Now, this is a really critical point. When an architect gets the soil report back from the lab, they're not looking for creative inspiration. No, they are hunting for red flags, because soil doesn't give you cool ideas. What it does is tell you what you absolutely cannot do. It sets hard, non-negotiable limits that can honestly make or break the entire project from day one.
And believe me, those limits are serious. What if you hit bedrock? Well, it's great for support, but blasting through it costs an absolute fortune. Sand? Sand is pretty good. But clay? Oh man, clay is a total nightmare. It swells up when it gets wet and then shrinks when it's dry, and it can literally crack a building's foundation apart over time. The wrong soil can turn a prime piece of real estate into a complete no-go zone.
And of course, we have to talk about water. People tend to mix up wetlands and floodplains, but for an architect, they are worlds apart. A wetland is basically an exclusion zone. It's a protected part of the watershed, and you just can't build there. End of story. A floodplain, on the other hand, is more of a conditional zone. You can build there, but you've got to play by a whole different set of rules, like raising the entire building up on stilts. It's a high-risk, high-regulation area. So once you've respected all the forces of nature, a whole new layer of the puzzle comes into play, the human rules. You can think of these as a web of invisible legal fences that crisscross every single piece of property in a city. The most common of these invisible fences are called zoning setbacks. So picture your property lines. The city basically draws another invisible line inside of those and says, hey, you can't build anything within, say, 10 feet of the front, 5 feet of the sides, and 15 feet of the back. And just like that, the land you can actually build on starts to shrink. But it doesn't stop there. Then you have things called easements. These are private legal rights. It could be the utility company that has the right to run a sewer pipe right through your backyard. Or maybe a neighbor has the right to use a strip of your land for their driveway. All of a sudden, another no-build corridor appears, and it often slices right through the middle of what you thought was your land. So with every single rule that gets layered on, setbacks, easements, all of it, the puzzle board just gets smaller and smaller. You might start with what looks like a big, promising piece of land, but what you're actually left with to build on is often just a tiny fraction of the property you actually own.
And sometimes the land itself has a toxic past. Maybe it was a gas station or an old factory. That can leave contaminated soil behind. Now, cleaning that up is incredibly expensive, so a common workaround is to just cap the polluted area, usually by paving it over for a parking lot, and then you build on the clean part of the site. So in a very real way, the history of the land is literally shaping its future.
All right, so we've wrestled with the forces of nature and the rules of law. But there's a third, much more subtle force we have to consider: the unwritten social contract of the neighborhood. This isn't about what you can legally build, but what you should build to be a good neighbor.
A good citizen building, as they call it, doesn't just take up space. It actually contributes to the life of the street. Its main entrance faces the public. Its ground floor windows are clear and inviting, making the street feel safer. It respects the size and the rhythm of the buildings next to it. It basically joins the conversation that the street is already having, instead of just shouting over everyone.
This also means you have to understand the street hierarchy. A good design puts all the exciting, people-friendly stuff, like shop entrances and lobbies, on the busy main street. And all the functional, less pretty stuff, like loading docks and garage entrances, gets tucked away on a side street or in an alley. That way, the pedestrian experience stays pleasant and uninterrupted.
And let's be honest, nothing kills a vibrant, walkable street faster than a giant surface parking lot right in the middle of it. It's a total dead zone that just shatters the whole pedestrian vibe. And that's exactly why, in good urban design, parking is almost always pushed to the back of the building, or, even better, buried underground, to preserve that human-scale magic at the street level.
So, there we have it. We've looked at the forces of nature, the layers of law, and the social contract of the neighborhood. The final act, then, is the synthesis, where all of these layers are overlaid on top of each other to hopefully reveal that one, single, perfect spot.
And that brings us to the fundamental question that every architect has to answer. They're not asking, what's the prettiest spot or where's the best view? The real question is this: which location resolves the most constraints with the fewest conflicts? It's a really rigorous process of elimination and optimization. And this, right here, is why a building's final location is never, ever arbitrary. It is a calculated, defensible answer. The architect needs to be able to point to the slopes, the soil reports, the legal codes, the neighborhood context, and prove that this exact spot is the single most logical solution to an incredibly complex, three-dimensional puzzle.
So, the next time you're walking down your street, I want you to look a little closer. See that building that's set way back from the curb? That's probably a zoning setback at work. That kind of weirdly placed parking lot on the corner? Maybe it's hiding some contaminated soil from long ago. You now have the tools to read the invisible language of your city. What hidden stories are you going to discover?